Hi folks, quick intro before I start this video proper. Sometimes when I do a lot of research for a video and I just chuck all these ideas down into a rough script, I worry that it doesn't flow properly. I think this video does, but you're gonna have to pay attention, because even I do when I watch it over again. Nevertheless, this is me trying to find the lost Roman town of Vindomis. It appears on a Roman list, a list being a journey from A to B and all the towns in between. One of those towns is Vindomis or Vindomis, but nobody knows where it is. This is my journey to try and find that lost town using a lot of different sources, a lot of different information. So bear with it, stick with it, there's a lot going on. Enjoy the video, let's roll the VT. On this channel, we normally make videos about old routes, whether it's an abandoned canal, Roman road, ancient trackway, you name it. But today we're going to do something we haven't done before. Today we're going to search for something static. But in order to do that, we need to look at the route, because as is often the case, the clues are in the journey. Welcome to the search for the lost Roman town of Vindomis, or Vindomius, or Vindinium. Welcome. Today's journey starts here, Farley Mount Folly, just to the west, a few miles west of Winchester. Down there in the trees in the distance, and right across the valley in front of us is a Roman road. That's Route 45A, and it went between Winchester and Sarum, part of a bigger route. We'll come to that shortly. The folly was built to commemorate a horse. It was a very curious name. The horse was called Beware Chalk Pit. That's not a warning, that's the name of the horse. So 1735, and apparently the horse that was buried under here won a important race. The owner a year before was riding the horse and it fell into a 25-foot deep chalk pit, hence the name. So back to Roman roads. I'll continue for your sanity and probably mine too to use the modern name for the Roman towns we're talking about. I head just back down the hill towards the Sarum, the Winchester route. Well, our story actually doesn't start there. For that, we need to head all the way down to Exeter. Okay, so I'm not actually going to head all the way to Exeter. Instead, we'll use some funky graphics, a bit like this. This is a route between Silchester in northwest Hampshire all the way down to Exeter. It has a number of important towns along its route. We'll come to that shortly. Now, Roman roads have numbers which are a relatively new addition. Ivan McGarry came up with a system similar to that used on modern roads today. But for the purpose of this video, that doesn't really matter. What does matter is how we know this route was actually a route. So the Romans used to use lists. Love a good list. Let's call them itineraries. Now, one of these was of the Roman Emperor Antonius, or Antonianus. I don't think it was specific to him, but nevertheless it was a list of 225 routes containing stopping places, stations, towns, you name it. Now, the most important part of that list to us here in the UK was the last 15 lists on the back end of that itinerary. Now, whilst they aren't hugely comprehensive to the entire network, in fact I think it only contained 25% of the known Roman roads in the UK, they did list the mileage and the towns along that route. And that's where today's mystery comes into play. The last route on that list of 15. So list XV, the road from Silchester all the way down to Exeter. Now the fact that that route was on the end of the UK, the British section, and that in itself was on the end of the entire itinerary, combined with the fact that it's probably been transcribed a few times since, we're probably going to be looking for some mistakes, and that is where today's mystery was born from. So here is that itinerary, transcribed once again, this time, well, by me. Now I'm going to hide most of that for the moment, so let's head to Exeter. As we do that, metaphorically of course, let's have a look at one of the oldest maps in existence for yet more context. This is the table Putinga, a 13th century parchment copy of a Roman map, and it's utterly beautiful and extremely not to scale. Just look at the scrolling I'm having to do to get to the far left end. Which interestingly and once again means the UK is not great. In fact, it's largely missing. All we have left is a very smudged bit of southern England. So can this help us in any way? Yes, it can indeed, because interestingly it contains the last section of itinerary 15, the Gittersham or near Honiton to Exeter, and lo and behold they both match. The map itself says 15 miles, and the itinerary itself says 15 miles. That's brilliant. So what's next? Well, let's look at the whole route, and I'll measure all of those distances between each town and compare them against the itinerary itself. Now bear in mind, of course, I said earlier it's smudged, so it's going to have a few mistakes, or at least we're expecting a few mistakes. So whilst I'll make those calculations in the background, just arrived at one of my favourite pieces of Roman road, which you can still see today because it's in the middle of an old deer park. This is Connaught, nearly at the top of Tute Causeway, where it took a deviation apparently. And yeah, in this deer park you can still see the Roman road today. Probably won't be able to see it on that camera, but if I just come down this bank here, well, this is one of the ditches at the side of the Roman road. Still mid-November and it's full of vegetation, so you're not really going to make any of it out. Perhaps from the sky you might be able to. Nevertheless, right there in front of me, that bank there is the Roman road, which heads north to Cirencester, south to Winchester. So a quick look at some obvious mistakes. Bradbury to Dorchester is roughly 18 to 19 miles, not as stated, so let's change that. Bradbury to Sarum is 21, not 12. Ashley to Sarum is more like 15, not 8. Winchester to Ashley is 6, not 11. So let's stop there, because now we've got one last distance to measure between Winchester and Silchester. Now if we draw a direct line between the two, well, that's 24 miles. Now the itinerary for this list states the overall route from Silchester to Exeter was 136. So that fits pretty well. 111 plus 24, that's 135, that's only a mile out. Fantastic. So why then are we seeing two different measurements between Silchester and Winchester? We're seeing an XV for 15 and we're seeing an XXI for 21 miles. That's 36 miles in total. And even if we try and draw lines to make those meet in different directions, well, that seems miles out of the actual line of the route itself. So that's confused antiquarians and anyone that's really sought to try and find Vindomis for centuries now. Do you take the literal route of 15 miles and 21 miles and therefore make a big deviation in the route, or do you take the straight line between the two, Winchester and Silchester, and make it, well, 22, 24 miles? In fact, some have suggested it's here in St Marybourne, just to the east of Andover, because if you take the 15 miles along the Portway, well, that fits quite well, but then the 21 mile passes down to Winchester, well, that doesn't work. And then there is Neefham, near Alton. Again, the distances could almost work. If you take 15 miles south-southeast along Roman Road 155, then you land here, and lo and behold, well, there was a significant town found here. Markets, dwellings, streets, you name it. The distance from here to Winchester, however, is around 20% out. So let's get back to the mileage. Let's assume they did indeed head from Silchester straight to Winchester. Let's change the XV to XII in case that was an error, and let's change the XXI to an XI in case that was an error. So then we have 12 and 11, and pretty much we bridged that gap. And well, that gives us a completely new insight into where we might find Vindomis. Here, near the wheat sheaf, pretty much halfway between the two. Now, I don't want you to think this is something I've magically come up with, this whole theory. Of course, the Roman Road Research Association have been mulling this over for years, and as I mentioned, antiquarians for decades and centuries alike. But it does show you what there is out there still to discover, still to discuss, and still to almost sit from your own armchair at home and ponder over. And of course, one thing that we've learned from this perhaps is it's not always best to start a route from Silchester or one specific point. Maybe sometimes it's good to flip it on its head and start the other end where you know something is correct, and then work backwards. That's one lesson I've learnt today. If you've enjoyed this little video, hit the like button, and I'll be back this time next week.